welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and this is another special edition of The Right Idea in Depth, where we kind of exhale and just take a break from all the headlines that are out there in the 24-hour news cycle, and we have an opportunity to kind of focus in depth on a particular issue. And outside of border security and immigration, one of the most important issues to Texans, in fact, the number 2 issue, according to a new poll that we just commissioned at TPPF, the number 2 issue for Texans is education, and making sure that our kids are getting the education that they deserve. And there is literally no better person, I think, to talk about this issue than Representative Brad Buckley. Representative Buckley, thank you for being with us today.
You bet. Thank you, Brian.
Representative Buckley is currently serving in his 3rd term in the Texas House of Representatives. He represents House District 54, which is a Bell County, Killeen area for most folks, literally right in the heart of Central Texas.
It is the heart of Texas.
Currently serves, of course, and this is the most important, as the chairman of the House Public Education Committee, and he's a former Killeen ISD school board member as well. So I think that's interesting for our listeners to know. And we will note that he is a proud Texas Aggie, and this Texas Longhorn will just let that go, and we'll decide to have a good conversation.
See you in November.
Exactly. No, can't wait. All right, so let's just jump right in. So, Chairman Buckley, thank you so much for being here. Again, education is the number 2 issue, and second most important issue according to the polling that we have for Texans. And again, for good reason, it's the building block, right? So. Talk to us a little bit about the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, it really kind of started before the pandemic, and then, of course, kind of moved during the pandemic. This idea of this parent empowerment movement, and parents kind of standing up and demanding more from the education system. What do you attribute to that rise of that movement?
I think it all really stems from parents, because of remote learning, were sort of brought into the classroom, and for some parents, what they saw was absolutely what they expected, and what they believed was going on in the classrooms was communicated across the screen as their children learned at home, and then for others, it was something totally different, and with that, I think parents began to take a second look. As a parent myself of 3 kids, all grown now, there was a time we knew our teachers. We did meet the teacher. We'd go to parent-teacher conferences. We do all those things. But then, you kind of go on and kids go to school. You go to work, and you check their homework, and hopefully they're progressing. But you really never get to see sort of what the real inner workings of classrooms like parents did during COVID. And like I said, there were many parents that were perfectly satisfied with what they saw. They saw great teachers in front of kids teaching, and then others that felt like, wait a minute, I'm not sure if this really meets our family's values. I'm not sure if this really is some of the basics that I know my kids are struggling with. And so parents began to ask questions.
And then the reaction from some of the schools was not what they had expected, right? And that we saw instances, and certainly not in your district, but the other instances around Texas, parents having their mics turned off at the school board and all of that, and that just kind of fomented, right? Yeah,
it is. I served on the school board in Killeen ISD in the early 2000s, and it's something I've learned, even chairing the Public Education Committee in the Texas House. When people come to testify, and especially when they're talking about their kids, you need to let them speak. Now, they need to be respectful, and they, obviously there's certain sort of rules of decorum you need to follow, but shutting that down is not productive. And, when we talk with each other, we tend to get more things done. But the more you try to push back, I believe, on parents having a voice, the more suspicion it raises. And, the idea that parents shouldn't be a crucial part of a child's education, that their opinion doesn't matter, is just foreign to me. I know even back in the early 2000s, we did everything we could to improve parental engagement in Killeen ISD because we wanted parents as partners. And we felt like that for the most part, we had that. But for some reason, parents have lost, in some areas, have lost that trust. And that's something we have to, I believe as state leaders, we have to help rebuild that for our schools and for our parents and ultimately for the kids.
Now, this is TPPF, so we're contractually obligated to talk about school choice every 15 minutes here.
Yeah.
So I'll just jump into that issue. Obviously, it was one of the biggest issues that was debated last year, several special sessions, and so on. Just generally, we don't have to get into the debates because we went through all that. But I want to know, and you're a supporter of school choice, but your family is involved in the public education system. You said you were a former school board member, and so from that perspective, how did you come to this issue? And I mean, you looked at both sides. I'm sure you heard it from both sides. How did you approach this issue and come to the conclusion that this was something you would support?
I approach it the way I do everything else is I like to look at what results we're getting. When given the honor of a lifetime to lead the Committee on Public Education, it was my job to really look at the results across Texas and ask the hard question: is are we doing enough? Are our kids learning enough? And it became very clear that too many kids were not reading on grade level. Too many kids were not doing mathematics on grade level. And that is something that I don't think that I know personally. I couldn't just look at it and go, well, okay, we'll just do things the way we always have, and we don't need to make changes. I don't approach anything in my life that way. With my own personal business life, when I feel like my business needs to make a correction, we make a correction. And so, I began to think about the issue, and I'd thought about it over the years, even as a school board member, and I never feared it. As a staunch supporter of public schools, I never thought that it was a threat to public schools. I always viewed it as another tool in the toolbox, and that kids, especially after having kids, and now watching my grandkids, they're all so unique. They each have their own individual needs, and they are not little carbon copies of each other. And so the idea that their learning experiences and educational opportunities might have to be different was not foreign to me. And so that's where I began to really research it and really look at, first of all, what in other states, what's been the impact on public schools, but more importantly, what's been the impact on student learning? And I feel like it's positive.
And why do you think? Because we want to talk about the ideas here. We're not talking about the personalities and all that kind of stuff. But and so we always try to at least come from a sense that as much as we care about these issues on our side, and much as we try to defend our positions, that a lot of people from the other side come at it from the same way. Why do you think this issue in particular is so personal to people, and it does foment passions, and people get excited about this issue?
Because I believe everybody in our public schools, everyone's working really hard. They're all trying to do their best to teach kids. And so our public school advocates, rightly so, want to defend, their system, or the system that my wife continues to serve in, that my kids attended, that I myself and my sister attended. And, I believe that's very natural. And I think it's also just the fear of the unknown. And the fear of change. And, I think any profession, when I think about, I'm a veterinarian by day. When I think about the way that I practiced veterinary medicine in 1993, it's not the way that I practice today.
Right.
And, we're always looking at best practices. We're looking at new science and new research, as a veterinarian, and then I adjust my practice accordingly. And I believe that's kind of the moment that we're in, that we need to make adjustments in our education system, and providing an additional tool for parents, and especially for parents that don't have the options that many parents already have. Some of us have kind of made our way through that. We really had school choice for my kids because we could pack up and go where we felt like that the education provided met the needs of our children. A lot of parents can't.
Right.
And so for me, I just can't look at that and say, well, that's just the way it is. I mean, we must continue to give them tools, and I really think the key point is, I even said this on the House floor, and I mean this, it's not an either or decision. It's not you're for public education or you're for school choice. the reality is we're for kids. And when we take the heat out of the conversation like that, I think we get back to what we all care about, and that is to make sure that kids are learning.
I think a lot of the, particularly in the political sphere, a lot of the arguments against school choice are disingenuous, dishonest, and hypocritical on a lot of levels. But I think there is a legitimate concern. I would look at people, particularly those who are in the system, teachers and principals, and those who do, at the very least, if they don't really grasp, exactly what's going to happen. There is some anxiety there in terms of, you mentioned that, right? I mean, you said,
sure.
Change is hard and that. Yeah. So for folks like that, when you go and meet with your former friends in the Clean district, when they ask you about those things, what's your advice to them? What's your counsel there?
It's the fact, our teachers, don't make enough money. It's always a profession. It's a profession. That my mother taught for 38 years, my grandmother for 42, my grandfather for 30-something years. My wife's been in public education. So we know our teachers really, don't earn a living that they should, given the work that they do. And so it's always a fear, I believe, that a school choice program will somehow take away those resources. And so what I've tried to be real cautious about and very deliberate about is to show how we can do both. We can support our public schools, and we can provide the resources they need, but also give parents that option, because again, it's not an either or. It's about kids learning. And again, anytime you're dealing with a moment of change, you're going to have folks that are going to be resistant and resist it. But the other thing, because I know what we did as a family, is I ask superintendents all the time, what makes you think they won't choose you? I did. My family did. And it's because our public schools where our kids went offered the things that we wanted our kids to have. So I believe that if you really it bears out across the country, and there are many states with school choice programs, many more than people recognize, I think, the vast majority, 90+% of all students attend public schools.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit. I think I've done my contractual obligation there at on school choice, and that's great to hear that from an insider perspective. I want to shift to something that I don't think that we talk enough about. And we do a ton of polling here at TPPF, and we ask parents and we ask Texans what their biggest concerns are when it comes to the education just here in Texas. And you'd be shocked to learn that school choice is not number one. And we ask them things like, school safety or bullying or, we put all the things on there. The number one consistently every single time is essentially the question, is my child getting the education that's going to prepare them for a career or for college or for the military? What are they actually, the things that they are learning, is that what they should be learning to get them ready to go on and go out into the world? That's the number one thing. And I don't think we talk about the quality of the education, actually the curriculum and those kinds of things. We don't talk about those things enough. And yet, what happened last session, I think, is going to be perhaps one of the most monumental and significant reforms in education in Texas's history. I want you to talk about, that was your bill. That was your bill. And of course, we had the great Senator Creighton over in the Senate side had the bill too. You all wrote about this bill. It's HB 1605. And I just want to use this one quote to kind of set the stage. You wrote in the Dallas Morning News, the title of it was, Texas schools need better instructional materials. And you had one of your lines is, the urgency of this issue cannot be overstated. For years, Texas teachers have been overworked and contemplated leaving the profession. In 2022 and 23 school year, 51% of Texas students across all grades were below grade level. If we do not address this, millions of young people will be left behind and unable to reach their potential, which will also harm the health of the Texas economy. So as your starting point, tell us about HB 1605 and what it does.
Yeah, it is very important legislation. I want to thank Senator Creighton for all his hard work on there. It's a very technical bill, a major reform in education. And really what we did is when we began to look at education across Texas, we realized that too many lessons were being taught below grade level in the classroom. And again, I don't believe anyone got together and said, hey, let's teach below grade level. But we kind of drifted that way because, we task our teachers with teaching a classroom full of kids, some that are talented and gifted and ready to run, others that are right on grade level, and others that really are struggling. We're struggling to catch them up. And so that is a monumental task. And often the materials that they were provided to use, the instructional materials, didn't really meet the moment. And so what 1605 does is to just simply raise the bar, to provide a process through the State Board of Education where instructional materials, in order to be on the high-quality instructional materials list, we call it HQIM because it's a mouthful. To get on that list, it's going to have to be go through a rubric process where they're analyzed by experts, where there's input from parents, where there's input from community members and professional educators, and then it goes before the state board to be approved to put on the list. And so you really have this whole process. That affirms that the materials sort of meet the moment. And, some of the materials were brought into Texas public schools during the pandemic as a means of closing the gap. I visited those classrooms. I've seen the results that we have, and you see it in two forms. You see teachers that have materials where they can really work on lesson delivery and not have to worry so much about lesson design. It's not a canned curriculum, but it provides them the resources necessary so that they are addressing all of the required standards, all the TEKS, if you will. And too many of our previous materials did not match that. So teachers were having to go outside of the classroom on the weekends or spend their weekends or their evenings sort of finding material to fill in the gaps. Well, these HQIM, it will not be the case. And so then they're able then to come back and present these rigorous materials that value the science of reading, that value a knowledge coherent sequence. In other words, things go in the right order, and they also match the standard so that when kids are then assessed, they have been taught everything they need to know. And we feel like that we'll have better scores on the assessments, but the scores aren't important. The important part is that kids are learning more.
Right. So you're really, this bill, it sounds like, you're really addressing the anxiety that parents have about this. As you say, you turn your kids over to the schools for 6-8 hours a day, and you're just hoping that it's working. This bill would seek to reassure parents that in fact that the kids are getting the high quality instructional material.
That's right. In 2011. A lot of the instructional material review process was pushed back down to the local school districts. There's a reason for that, and but we're in a different moment now. So now what this does is it returns it. And the other thing now districts do not have to participate in the HQIM.
I was going to ask you. There's been some criticism that do you think like this takes the flexibility away from teachers and all that? How do you respond to that criticism?
I've been in classrooms and teachers are not concerned about that. Some advocates are. So if you haven't seen it, by the way.
So if you have a teacher who has been a good teacher for 25 years and they have a system and they feel like their students are learning and that they don't have to use any of this,
no, they don't. And there are where I found the most poignant commentary that I heard were for some teachers that were 1, 2, or 3 years in that were like, you know what, I was thinking about maybe not continuing this profession. But with the implementation of the HQIM, they're saying, listen, I'm being successful, and I'm going to stick around. And what we have in too many districts are teachers that have not gotten down the pathway long enough as far as their experience. Because any profession, as a veterinarian, my first year, I was not near the quality of veterinarian that I was in year 5 or 9 or 10 or 15. That experience is really where you really develop as a professional. And so if we can provide materials where teachers will stay, where they can have success, but most importantly, kids can learn, we've really, I think, begin to close a significant gap, with these materials. And so we're hopeful that the state board will continue this process, and that that our citizens across Texas and different communities will weigh in on these materials, And we've got some special materials, too, that the state has produced.
One of the criticisms, of course, during the testimony, too, was that the materials are too difficult, that it's too challenging, too rigorous. I mean, as a parent, is that what you want to hear, that they're not challenging, that they're too challenging for your kids?
I've been in classrooms, and I've seen a classroom in Temple, Texas, where, it was probably 22, 23 kids, a great teacher, had great classroom management, but the material she was teaching was rigorous, and kids were on task because, I just believe that kids love a challenge. And when they're challenged, they're motivated and they're engaged. And we just saw kids all engaged in a reading aloud, and you had readers that were incredibly fluent, and you had kids that really struggled. Mm-hmm. But in this environment where the bar was high, there was an attitude in that classroom that they were all in it together. Mm-hmm. And I saw an incredibly fluent reader, read a passage as well as I could in the fourth grade. And then his neighbor sitting next to him, a young man that struggled, and the fluent reader move over and assist him. And there wasn't a side eye or a snicker in the room. It was, you could tell that was done, that they were all in it together. Mm-hmm. And that expectation that they were learning and that it was challenging. Challenging material is like, if you remember back to your college days, there are certain things I remember that weren't challenging to me in one part of the lesson, but other things were very challenging. Mm-hmm. And you needed each other, right, to someone to help you get through those parts. And so that's what you're seeing in classrooms. And discipline problems go down when kids are engaged. Mm-hmm. And these materials really are a great step in getting that done in Texas classrooms.
So there's certainly a benefit for teachers because you're providing materials that are on grade level. There's certainly the benefit for kids because, as you said, this has been some pilot programs have been going on, and there's been some really good results from those pilot programs. I want to talk about parents, too. Yeah. Now, I'm a new parent. I have a 2-year-old, and what I like the most is knowing, if she's at her class at pre-K, I like knowing what she's reading, and so that, we can talk about it on the drive home about the story about the frog or something. And there's that element here too, which is that parents can have access to the materials as well, and that encourages more parental engagement, which of course is a key component of kids learning and having that curiosity.
Yeah, all of the materials that will be certified HQIM or make the list will have to have a parental portal. And it has to be designed by the producers of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so a parent then will know exactly where their kids are in terms of what they're learning, and they can enter that portal, if you will, so that they can have those conversations like you're talking about. Ask them about what they're reading. Ask them about their math. Ask them about the content. So really, you get two things as a parent. Okay, what are they learning? Is this appropriate? Does this match my values? Mm-hmm. Number two, how can I help them be better at it if they're struggling? Mm-hmm. And that's something that I know as a parent myself that we would often struggle. One of my kids would come home and they're working on something and they want me to help them, and I could probably help them, but then there was always, well, we don't do it that way, and I'm not sure if I'll get credit for it, and I didn't really have a way to know how they did it. This really opens it up to the parents, and I think we can have a much better parental-teacher relationships now if we have this sort of transparency in curriculum.
And can you talk a little bit about, we had Tom Lindsay here, and I spoke with him about it. He's on the advisory board. One of the things that he's really excited about is this new approach that the curriculum has, this classical learning. Yeah. There's a lot of, that's kind of a buzzword. There's a lot of excitement around that, and a lot of parents trying to find that kind of thing for their kid. Could you talk a little bit about what that is and how that works?
Yeah, I think when I think classical content or classical curriculum, I think sort of a return to the basics. When you think about, when I think about the education that I received, I think about some of the classic literature that I read and how I learned to write from that, and how I really learned to think critically and all that, and that's what this return. That's what high-quality instructional materials really return to, especially the state's version of the OER, which is an open education resource. And I think what it does is it gives our public schools a curriculum option that many parents are seeking. And I always hear, especially in the debate of school choice, that some districts will say, well, private schools have a certain advantage. Well, here's something that levels the curricular playing field for public schools, because the content there is rigorous. It's a classic content, and I'm just absolutely certain you're going to see better outcomes. When kids are taught with this level of curriculum, and it bears out. I mean, I think when you look at what you see with classical content, that it really sort of reinforces that basic level of student engagement that you really need to have to be truly educated.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about the schools having that option.
And Tom talks about how, you don't just learn something 1 year. You don't just learn world history in 1 year, or learn that you're learning, historically, particularly when it comes to history, learning a little bit about something every single year. So you're building on that foundation.
Oh, yeah. From very young age, you may have a reading passage, but it's cross-curricular. So you'll have a social science or historical passage or a scientific passage that will actually be the passage you read, quote, in reading language arts, but you're learning things about that scientific subject as well. And so, you've got several things going on at once there. And that, I think, is when I learned to read, I think about it, it was kind of about tip and mitten, but really, you could have those reading passages be something that would also begin to get the brain, sort of wired into historical facts and science and those things. And so I agree with Tom. It's repetition. It's material that increases in its rigor as a kid matriculates up the grade levels.
And one of those historical facts, of course, and this brings in sort of a far left criticism of this, is that Christianity is central to the development of the Western world, and so there are instances in the new curriculum that mention things like the Good Samaritan, or Daniel in the Lion's Den, or the Golden Rule, and having a conversation about how to be a good person and using the story of the golden, or the principle of the Golden Rule. People have said, "Oh, that looks like religious indoctrination." What is your response to that criticism?
Well, it's not. First of all, what it is, it's part of a classical framework. If you really want to understand the foundings of this country, so much of some of our founding documents, the way they were structured, if you want to understand some of the greatest orators in the history of this country, from really both sides of the aisle, if you will, if we want to clarify that, there are often biblical references in those texts. And not understanding those references really falls short of being truly educated. We are absolutely certain that the materials do not violate any principle of the separation of church and state. But we feel like, and I told another gentleman one day I was talking to, I said, if you want to address these some of our major historical figures and founding fathers, and you want to leave out a religious perspective or religious text or sort of religious context, it'd be like teaching cardiology but say, hey, we're not going to mention the heart. It is such an important part. Again, religious beliefs are the role of the parent, but the content of these materials falls far short of being religious material. It simply is a factual depiction of our founding and of history.
Now, I'll say it again. I think you have done tremendous work. I mean, I know that a lot of the debate over education is on the funding or school choice or all these other things. This, to our audiences, I want to be very clear. This is probably one of the most significant pieces of education reform in the history of this state. For that reason, because we're going to be significantly improving how the kids learn, but also what they're learning. And yet we're still not quite out of the woods yet. You've done all that work. You've passed the bill, and it passed with bipartisan majorities in both the House and the Senate. But now it goes to the SBOE, the State Board of Education, for their approval. There's a comment period right now, and so we have a few months left until we get to there. What is your message to the SBOE or to any other folks who might be looking at this and considering it?
Yeah. Well, like anything that you do in public life, and especially in public policy, there's always different opinions. And there are those that believe that HQIM, the high quality materials, and also our classical content curriculum that the state's produced, let's just say they're against it. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to be registering against it in the comment period that the State Board of Education has. Mm-hmm. And, I think, but it's also time I want parents to take a look at it themselves, and I want them to register their opinion. Because I think, we talked to many parents in many school districts across the state. They call us, they're like, what is this? And we have the discussion. In one of our meetings, we were going to be there like 30 minutes, and like an hour and a half later, the superintendent and the curriculum director, they were so dug in on this classical content and the fact how it matched the values of their community. And I'd hate to see this thing derailed, especially by folks that really don't understand it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it's so important for us to really begin to accelerate the education system in Texas. I think it's a great thing for public schools. Mm-hmm. I go to school. I addressed a school board meeting the other day in Killeen, and the superintendent said, we're moving towards to make sure that we're having HQIM because we've seen the results. Mm-hmm. Educators know what works, and they know what's good for teachers, but more importantly, they know what's good for kids. And so I really want the public, especially moms and dads, parents, guardians, anyone, to take a look at this, and if you like it, weigh in on it and give them a thumbs up.
To our audience, if you want to learn more about it, again, it's HB 1605. It's the bill is actually fairly easy to read when you get through it. But if you want to learn more, I believe TEA has some good resources. The Texas Education Agency. If you just Google Open Education Resources or HQIM, you'll find more information about that. In the last couple minutes, I do want to jump to other issues that might be of interest to you. I mean, yes, you're the chairman of the House Pub Ed Committee, and so that's going to be really, really important. But it's not the only issues that you care about or that your district cares about. Obviously, ag issues would be one that would be really important to you, or veterans issues, a different kind of vet. Back in there, of course, you've got Fort Hood right there. And so is there anything else outside of education that's going to be like a major priority or something that you're going to be looking at for next session?
It's so important in my district for us to always focus on those that have served, and that's our veterans. Last session, we were so pleased to pass a service dog program for our veterans to receive a high-quality service dog for those suffering from post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and to really provide them a partner so that they can deal with issues that they're facing with a high-quality service dog that's provided by a vetted nonprofit that has a proven track record, and get them the other assistance that they need. It's a pilot program. We know the connections are starting to be made now between veterans and animals. Of course, as a veterinarian, this is even more special to me. Mm-hmm. But what we'll find is that when you have a high-quality service animal for folks that are suffering from post-traumatic stress, that often their reliance on psychotropic medications goes down. Mm. And so we'll be tracking the Texas Veterans Commission is tracking that, keeping track of all the metrics. We'll review that next session as well. We're really excited, to see how that comes out. We think it's going to be really good for veterans. The other thing that I care a lot about is education, but military kids with Fort Hood, or now Fort Cavazos there in my district.
I know. I just realized I said Fort Hood, and I'm going to get canceled.
I do that all the time. It's just I've lived there all my life, so no problem. But we have families that move in from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, and so we've done some things to make it easier for a military family to enroll their kids in school. We've given them some school choice, if you will, and where they can go in terms of our campuses that have a Purple Star program where they have counselors and teachers specially trained to deal with kids that have had to move a lot. Mm-hmm. So we were proud to do that. We'll continue to work on that. In the ag sector, I've worked on a bill to and passed last session to basically it's called the Truth in Labeling for Meat Bill. And we have a world now where we have cattle producers that are raising beef, but you also have sort of fake meat in a bag, and you have fake meat that's it's fake meat that's going to be made in a dish. Yeah. And I just want Texans to know the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let the market decide. But I do want to make sure that those that have raised livestock, been in the cattle business for generations, that they're not losing, or they're not losing out to a market that has an unfair advantage on them. So we've worked very hard on that. And
thank you for protecting our barbecues. We appreciate
that.
Well,
we need to have quality, natural beef at our barbecue. That's for sure. That's
excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here with us and talking about these issues. Obviously, school choice and the issue on HB 1605, and those issues as well as the other ones you brought up. We'll keep a close eye on all of that. We'd love to have you back to tell us, how it's all going when the recession starts.
You bet. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, and thank you for being here. And thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. As we like to say on every show, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.